Okay, I am on chapter 1 of Fear and Loathing on the campaign trail 72. And I need to, I don't know if I'd actually call it a disclaimer, but I do want to alert some people to content which times have changed. You know, I mentioned in the introduction the very much more casual view towards drugs and sex. And that's something that I actually think is a good thing. However, in this chapter, I'm finding a very casual attitude towards racism. And that is not a good thing. I was barely a handful of pages in where the author is referring to a black person by the N-word. Very uncomfortable. I realize that the book is a product of its times, and that was something that a lot of people just did. And they might not necessarily even have been racist. It could have been cultural. And I'm glad that we've moved beyond that. So, you know, you can't censor the past. I like the saying that says, history is like a different country. People do things differently there. And that's kind of the way I tend to look at history, but I did want to bring that up. That really stuck out at me, and you'll see that in one of these titles. So at the beginning of the chapter, he gives certain subtitles, but those subtitles aren't used within the chapter, which is kind of weird. Let me show you. There's you would think that's a separate section in the chapter, but it's not. But he thought they were necessary, so I want to read them. Is this trip necessary? Strategic retreat into national politics. 2 minutes and 1 gram before midnight on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Setting up the National Affairs Desk. And then here's the part of the chapter that gets into some casual racism. Can Georgetown survive the Black Menace? And Fear and Loathing in Washington. And he came from Colorado, apparently. So he said something here that when a man gives up drugs, he wants big fires in his life. All night long, every night, huge flames in the fireplace and the volume turned all the way up. Okay, so apparently he was trying to kick whatever habits that he had. So this is basically documenting his travel from Colorado to settling into DC. And yeah, on the second page of this chapter, the N-word is used to refer to the person who delivered the newspaper and apparently got him angry because he shattered a light or something when he threw the paper, and he seems to gloat on the fact that his Dobermans attacked this person. And in referring to some high crime areas or dilapidated areas that are kind of run down, he blames them on the black marauders. So yeah, that didn't take long. And, you know, he details out the high crime. And DC still is high crime. Oh, and he was from Woody Creek, Colorado, apparently. I don't even know where that's at. I'm going to need to look that up. And he mentions the racist undertones, but it's funny because he almost in this paragraph tries to make it the other people's problems, but he's the guy who just, you know, called someone delivering their paper the N-word. But this is what he said. There is no way to avoid racist undertones here. The simple, heavy truth is that Washington is mainly a black city, and that most of the violent crime is therefore committed by blacks, not always against whites, but often enough to make the relatively wealthy white population very nervous about random social contacts with their fellow black citizens. After only 10 days in this town, I have noticed the fear syndrome clouding even my own mind. So at least he's acknowledging it's happening to him. And of course, if the majority of your population is one race, the majority of crimes are going to be committed by that one race. That's just statistics. That's just numbers. And if it's another race that tends to hold the wealth, I mean, thieves' crimes are generally about money. Or revenge, murder or something like that. But at least the thieving part of whatever criminal element are going to target wealthy people. They weren't targeting them because they were white, at least from what I can gain from here, but they were wealthy. You don't steal from poor people. They don't have anything to steal from, for you to steal from them. All right. So he gives stories of his just meandering, journey and how he picked up these two potheads. Yeah. And those potheads asked him why he's going to Washington. And he said, that's why I'm going to check out the people and find out if they're all swine. And one of the people that, I guess they were more like hippie types, said to him, don't worry, they are. You might as well go looking for cherries in a Baltimore whorehouse. And there's the much more casual attitude towards explicit and casual sexual references. So he says, with December winding down, there is a fast swelling undercurrent of political angst in the air around Washington, a sense of almost boiling desperation about getting Nixon and his cronies out of power before they can finish the seizure that began 3 years ago. I bet you it was very similar to the desperation felt to get Trump out, though that group was successful and this group then was not. There is a sense of muted desperation in the Democratic ranks at the prospect of getting stuck and beaten once again with some tried and half-true hack like Humphrey, Jackson, or Muskies, and George McGovern, the only candidate in either party worth voting for, is hung in a frustrated limbo created mainly by the gross cynicism of the Washington press corps. One thing I will give for this author, he creates good sentences. He can create long sentences that don't bother the reader, like they're not distracted by them. And that's not always easy to do. And so he really avoids choppy writing, but more rolling narrative, if I had to describe that. And he finds it unbelievable that McGovern couldn't win if he were the nominee. And he felt that the youth would support McGovern. And just like today, it was pointed out, yeah, but they're not voting. And it says also here that there was a concern that Ted Kennedy might run. And according to the Gallup polls, the underculture, I'm not sure what that is, the underculture. It's a term I'm not familiar with. The underculture vote is building up a fearful head of steam behind Ted Kennedy. And this drift has begun to cause genuine alarm among bigwigs and pros in both parties. The mere mention of Kennedy's name is said to give Nixon bad cramps all over his body, such as it is. That was a little bitch slap there, wasn't it? Oh, boy. And angst about Supreme Court nominees, and apparently the author was very upset that Rehnquist was going to be confirmed. and something you'll find funny. There were people in the Democratic Party back then that were called, this isn't an official like a show, just a general term, Young Turks, if that sounds familiar, with the show, which is those ultra-progressive Democrats. And funny, the word Nazi already comes up. See, there's nothing new under the sun. So he said, this disastrous Nazi-bent shift of the federal government's final decision-making powers, referring to the Supreme Court, won't even begin to take effect until the spring of '72. So, I mean, for me, that's new. People aren't usually calling the Supreme Court Nazis, at least not today. Yeah, he says the effect of this takeover, he's still referring to the Supreme Court, are potentially so disastrous in terms of personal freedom and police power that there is no point even speculating on the fate of some poor misguided geek who might want to take his illegal search and seizure case all the way to the top. Now, it's very apparent that this author considers himself a liberal, but this was a liberal more in like the traditional sense of the word liberal, not the progressives we have today, which is why I think I will find a lot in common with them. Man, I have my nail supply right here, and this must not be capped because I'm smelling monomer. No, it's capped. It might be eating through the bottle. If you don't, oof, it is that bottle. If you don't know what monomer is, if you ever go into a nail salon and it's super strong and you probably think that's acetone, it's not. It's monomer, which is used to take acrylic powder and liquefy it so that it can be put on the nails and then it hardens. But the monomer, it's a terrible smell, and it's even escaping that bottle. Yeah, so it takes powder like this. This is a little thing of powder. Isn't that a nice bright pink? But continuing. And he says he has a tendency when he writes to go off on mad tangents for multiple pages. And doing that and getting in trouble with his publisher and the tax man for some reason has taught him a lesson. And this is his life lessons for people. Live steady, don't fuck around, give anything weird a wide berth, including people. It's not worth it. I learned this the hard way through brutal overindulgence. That's probably decent advice. And that is it for January 71, and we will be moving to January 72. I like to give you guys an idea of how many pages it is. And there's a lot of talk, it looks like, about Hubert Humphrey. There's a lot of photos. So here's where February starts. Under 20 pages, so very similar to January. So we will be doing that next.